The modern houses of the past have survived in popular imagination as the ideal suburban paradise. From stained glass windows to the warmth of hardwood floors, the features of old homes in the U.S. are quite worthy of attention, if not only for evoking nostalgia of a bygone era. Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today we go over the top 15 old home features in the U.S., looking at both the obsolete and the valuable. By wading through such an intimate aspect of our pasts, we can see just how far house life has come, and, ironically, just how much we can learn from the practices of the old. Let's begin. Number 15. Transom Windows. Usually made of stained glass, the transom used to be a window above a house's front door. Now associated often with Christmas movies and old westerns, this window was not just in place for purely decorative purposes. As a matter of fact, it has two main purposes. The first is to allow natural light to filter into the main hallways of the house, something that was quite useful in an era where electricity was scant. Secondly, it is very useful for year-round air circulation and regulating in-home temperatures. In the past, apartments, office buildings, large homes, and schools used transom windows near expansive spaces like hallways in order to provide constant airflow, a natural source of light and temperature regulation. Though they are not used for those purposes today, the transoms still hold aesthetic appeal owing to the beautiful stained glass they require. Number 14. Sleeping porches. In the early 20th century, suburban life was becoming commonplace in the U.S., and people became increasingly experimental with how they wanted to style their personalized homes. This is the context in which sleeping porches became a massive trend, especially for health-conscious homeowners. Doctors suggested using balconies or porches for outdoor sleeping to enhance exposure to natural air and bolster immune systems. These features have fallen out of fashion as front porches don't remain as expansive as they used to be, and it has become more efficient for people to maintain compact and vertically expanding houses. Number 13. Dumbwaiters. These novel devices were used commonly for transporting food from the basement or the kitchen upstairs to the dining halls and rooms. Though they are still used in some old-fashioned commercial buildings, their use has largely died out due to developments like the elevator. The dumbwaiters were a very inventive creation for its time, however. It consisted of boxes inside a vertical wall shaft that could be pulled up and down with a pulley. Since they were quite small and could fit children, these devices led to numerous injuries and accidental deaths. Fortunately, with elevators and the relocation of kitchens out of the basement and into the first floor of the house, the dumbwaiter has largely gone out of commission in American houses. Number 12. Fireplaces. The idea of fireplaces is not outdated, but the purpose they have served historically certainly is. These were not simply decorative but essential, and were found in every major room of the house. The most popular and luxurious fireplace asset was the Rumford fireplace. It had a tall and shallow design, which allowed the fire pit to reflect as much heat as possible around the room. This feature was found in many rooms within the houses and became a staple of American housing. That is, until they were sadly replaced by the invention of central heating devices and furnaces. However, ironically, with escalating fuel prices, people have started to look back towards fireplaces as a valuable asset. In general, they have become increasingly restored to homes due to their aesthetic and decorative value as well. Number 11. Laundry chutes. This is another invention that has now become increasingly obsolete with the development of smaller and more compact houses. Since most laundry was done in basements, it was often a hassle for individual members of the house to go downstairs to carry all their laundry around. With the development of these chutes, all household members had to do is to throw their dirty clothes down. The whole of the chutes and a laundry basket would be waiting for them in the basement. A simple device, but quite effective and widely used. Again, thankfully, technological advancement has allowed us greater ease in handling our laundry and has rendered this asset obsolete. Number 10. Mail slot. Up until very recently, and before the unfortunate decline of the USPS, the mail slot was a staple for front doors in American homes. Still present in pop culture that is centered around American daily life back in the 50s and 60s, this convenient device was almost ubiquitous in its use. It enabled every friendly mail carrier in different neighborhoods. The ease of sorting mail into these slots, rather than knocking at every person's home to deliver messages from their loved ones. The mail slot has gone into decline following the decline of the USPS and the rise of digitalization and online banking. Once a very secure and cost-effective way of delivering and receiving mail, the mail slot has had the misfortune of being swept by the tides of time and technology. Number 9. Milk doors and chutes. We might now think it ludicrous for perishable necessities like milk to be delivered at our doorstep, especially with the spread of supermarkets everywhere in the U.S. However, before the Great Depression, America did not have the automobile infrastructure to support regular travel to supermarkets. Often, perished items like milk were replenished by delivery men on a regular basis. Here, milk doors and chutes became quite common assets in old American homes. This feature basically involved having a chute or a door in the kitchen from where delivery men could retrieve empty bottles and bring them back replenished. Though a very simple and necessary feature to enable constant access to household items, these chutes were quite small and dangerous, especially for children. For this reason, once they lost their purpose, they were mostly bricked over or converted into other valuables like mailboxes or slots. Number 8. Home Canaries. Once again, in Home Canaries we find a creative and effective solution to an issue which plagued American households and their access to essential items in an age where automobiles were not so widespread. Home gardening and canaries were a major source of food production and preservation, especially for rural households and for cities that were not so well connected with supermarkets. Of utmost concern was the need to preserve food for winters, a time where transport was especially difficult. Canaries were usually built in basements, with richer households making secondary basements and constructions to house essential items like vegetables, jam, and fresh fruit sealed in mason jars. In the less populated Midwest, items extended to include dry herbs and seeds. With the advance of logistical capacity, these canaries are no longer required and are often repurposed to serve other purposes. Number 7. Phone nooks. Technological advancement has brought with it an ease of comfort that was impossible to imagine even 30 or 40 years ago. However, it is still quite intriguing to see just how households of that time adjusted to difficulties we can't even comprehend in the present. Perhaps the most unique yet effective among them all are phone nooks. A commonplace presence in movies and TV shows that feature American homes, but in reality, a feature resigned to a long-gone past. At a time when phone nooks were quite large, bulky, and difficult to wield, homes often had to install special nooks on walls to accommodate and fix these bulky assets. Long before the era where smartphones had features that made even regular phone calls a secondary requirement, telephones had to remain fixed to a wall and were connected with switchboard operators whom you contacted first to be able to talk to your actual number. The oldest of these home phones required wooden boxes that resembled payphones and a winding magneto generator that facilitated the bells. These massive machines soon gave way to smaller and more cost-effective telephones like the candlestick phone, and such developments eventually paved the way for the obsolescence of phone nooks. In the present, it would be hard to think of a need to install an entirely separate infrastructure for phone calls in your home. Number 6. Cooling shelves. Marble cooling shelves were a commonplace feature in American homes when access to bakeries and eateries was limited. Since in those times baking was widespread in houses with freshly baked pies, pastries, and breads a common occurrence, there was a need for viable cooling places. It was difficult to cool one's food by the window, considering one doesn't want their previously baked items to be sullied by birds and scavengers. For this reason, marble cooling shelves were installed, and they proved to be very useful in the process of baking and preserving. Now, as marble roofing and flooring has become relatively cheaper, and there are better devices for cooling and preservation, such as fridges, the need for marble cooling shelves has died off. Number 5. Coal chutes. You can now see these small window-like chutes sealed off in older homes and used for decorative purposes. Coal chutes are the symbol of a bygone era where coal was used to power houses, furnaces, and essentially the entire economy. With no effective mechanism for electricity distribution, coal was effectively the only source of fuel for home furnaces. Delivery men used to come and distribute this coal door to door, putting it into a chute which would lead directly to the basement where homeowners could shove it into furnaces. While this sounds like quite a dated and astonishing idea, what considering the environmental and health hazards of such methods? Coal chutes were a basic necessity for homeowners up till the middle of the 20th century, where they gradually began to be replaced. Even now, however, one can observe old homes that have these chutes now sealed off and serving no real purpose. Number 4. Radiators. Made out of wrought or cast iron, radiators emerged as one of the first sources of centralized heating in American houses and apartments. As a matter of fact, though they are proven to be less effective than modern HVAC systems, radiators are still used by many households due to their historical prominence. These devices usually involve water droplets that are condensed, being moved around by incredible steam pressure. Though used primarily for heating purposes, radiators had many other advantages. They were used for drying clothes in particularly rainy weather, especially by using supplementary rack attachment. Additionally, homeowners often use the forged iron of the radiators to make other more ornate designs. Lastly, in the early 20th century onwards, radiators also had attached water tanks, which helped in combating dry air by acting as functional humidifiers. If you really think about it, this feature in old homes was incredibly effective for its time, especially considering the many diverse uses it had. Number 3. Boot scraper. This old home feature is incredibly sensitive to the context of its time and for that reason will appear quite absurd to us in the present day. Imagine a world without paved roads and with such incredibly massive amounts of dirt piled everywhere in the cities that you simply could not enter your house with the same boots that you left it in. Enter boot scrapers. These devices were located near the front door and were made of cast iron bars. It was a reflection of the growing middle-class sensibility with regards to cleanliness and civilized behavior. These scrapers were used by both homeowners and guests alike to clean one's boots off of its dirty muck before entering one's foyer. The iron bars were eventually replaced with plastic bars, and then, with the development of paved roads and increasing public concern over cleanliness and community maintenance, the need for boot scrapers was discarded and forgotten into the sands of time. They were, in simpler words, the remnant of an era where houses were still in the throes of unprecedented industrial change and the overcrowding of cities. Number 2. Servant bells. This particular feature was very widespread in middle and upper-class American homes before the advent of electric bells. Bell pulls were often located in every room, especially in the case of a large house, behind panels or curtains. When pulled, the rope used to extend into the servant quarters and ring the bell there as well. This allowed maids and butlers to look both into the servant being called and the room to which they were being asked to visit. In more Victorian-era houses, there was also the presence of speaking tubes that allowed homeowners to effectively interact with their servants, who were usually in the basements, without going through much of a hassle. Now, with the development of electric intercoms and bell buttons, there is no such need for elaborate technology. What's more important to note is that in the U.S., the culture of domestic servants has diminished to a negligible degree. Adding to that, the fact that most kitchens are also now located on the first floor, there really is little need for elaborate servant bells by all accounts. Number 1. Speaking tubes. Long before the spread of home electricity, home intercoms were well-established features of American housing. The older of these intercoms consisted of speaking tubes that ran through the walls of the house. On each end of the tube, there was a nickel-made mouthpiece and a cap. Upon removing the cover, a person could speak into the mouthpiece, and the voice would come out on the other ends. Sounds quite cool, right? Well, these were not rare household features, especially before the advent of large payphones. They were used for a variety of purposes that extended from effective contact with domestic servant quarters to just having ready contact with different members of the house. Of course, one wouldn't imagine having such a device in the present day unless one wishes to live the life of a full technological abstinence. However, to be fair, that applies to most items in this list. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out this other very interesting video showing on screen. See you in the next one.